Today we're speaking with Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. He's a very good friend of mine, and I'm excited to welcome him into this space. Zulfikar is a visual artist, performer, and curator. Bhutto's work resurrects complex histories in the South Asian, Southwest Asian, and North African region. In the process, he unpacks the intersections of queerness, Islam, speculative fiction, futurity, and environmental degradation through a multimedia practice rooted in printmaking, textile work, and performance. Zulfi, it is such a pleasure to see you. Thank you for joining us. We're sort of dealing with a little bit of an internet technology question. So Zulfi and I will be sort of going back and forth, muting ourselves. But the conversation will nevertheless be fantastic. So Zulfi, let me just start by saying welcome and getting right into the questions. What brought you to the Bay Area, and what brought you into the Swana community in the Bay Area?
Hi, Roula. Thank you so much for your introduction. And it's such a joy and a pleasure to be talking with you, and thank you, Shagaya and Aggregate Space also for hosting this as well. And it's an honor to be included with this wonderful range of artists that I am being included with. So what brought me to the Bay Area? You know, it's funny, not, you know, as a kid, San Francisco and Berkeley were always were part of my vocabulary. They were part of my understanding of what the United States was, which is, you know, compared to a lot of other people in Pakistan who maybe would think of New York or Washington or LA or Chicago, but particularly Berkeley and San Francisco, because Berkeley my grandfather went to for undergrad. And then my grandfather, my father's side, that is, and then I had known of San Francisco because as a young queer young thing who was sort of coming into his teenagehood, you know, I was maybe, you know, I was 14 in 2004, right? I was born 1990, so there's, you know, at that time YouTube had just become a thing, right? At that time, the internet had just started to become like easy and accessible. You know, you didn't have to go, you know, Wi-Fi just became a thing. You know, like it was that kind of generation. And so of course I started learning more about queer rights. You know, like there were all these videos that were suddenly accessible of people coming out and in life. And of course, San Francisco popped up over and over again. And even in my own home, it was a Times magazine, and it was like like the millennium. It was like a Times Millennium magazine or something like that, like released in 1999. And in it was a whole article about Harvey Milk, and that was the first time I had heard about Harvey Milk in San Francisco. And I had come from a political family already, and for me, politics and queer rights and gay, or being gay, or being either of the two openly, was not, they were just not, that just wasn't a reality, right? Like that just wasn't our world. And it still wasn't our world. Even after reading about Harvey Milk being able to do this, it wasn't our world. But I knew it was possible somewhere. So San Francisco kind of became cemented in my mind in that way. But after some time, and after, you know, growing up and everything, then it kind of started to slip away. I started to see queer rights from a different perspective, from a more indigenous perspective, a more Pakistani perspective. And then I went to Edinburgh University, and I fell in love, and that person said, I'm going to Berkeley, and you should follow me. And I said, yes, I will follow you. We broke up a year later, and I stayed 6 more years. So, and I applied to the San Francisco Art Institute in order to come, because as someone who doesn't have dual citizenship, you have to find a way to get somewhere. So I applied for art school, which was something I already wanted to do. At the time anyway. I was initially thinking of going to Europe. But anyway, that's a really long introduction, but I felt like all of those things were really necessary to set up the tone for how this is going to go.
Absolutely, that makes sense. I don't think I knew your family's connection to the Bay Area, to Berkeley, and so that's a lovely note just sort of fills in like a gap in my knowledge, and just how fortunate we are to have that you chose the Bay Area as the place to pursue graduate education, and that SFAI was such a solid fit for you. So once you arrived, how did you, like, what was it like meeting other people in the Swana community? Did that happen through collaborations at school, or through just sort of random introductions, family, it's so many interesting ways in which it happens, but like, how did that progress for you?
It was a mix. Mostly the connections were built once I left. But Minouche, for example, was a year ahead of me, and of course, instantly gravitated towards her. And there were a couple other people who were Swana, but it's funny, most of the people in my year group were actually from South America, and those were the people I was collaborating with in grad school. And even actually after, I went to Colombia and did a couple of performances because of them, because of their invitations, and it was that was fun. So yeah, I mean, most of my connections in grad school were with people, of course, from the global South, and my collaborations were from people from the global South. But yeah, mostly Latin America, South America. Yeah. So yeah, mostly when I left, and I think that was a community I really I'm trying to sort of grasp, but like it kind of was very organic, we all sort of found each other in this sort of haze of things. And I think as long as you insisted on doing work that was related to the quote unquote Swana region, then people noticed, people noticed each other. And so slowly over time, and it was slow, actually, it was very slow, slowly over time, a community was built.
I love the idea of you and Minouche, and like maybe the first conversations that you had, and because I adore both of you, but just imagining the first connections that were made, and that moment of recognition of like, oh, here is someone who maybe more so than anyone else in your cohort just understood life, not just in a global, like from a global South perspective, but but that someone who has, it's Iranian, Lebanese, Pakistani, like all of the like the cultural grounding that you have, that she also, like, there's some recognition there, and that recognition is powerful and is such an amazing way to forge any kind of relationship, but particularly artistic collaborations. That's such strong ground to build on. So I love that idea. And Manouche is one of my favorite people, and my heart just goes when I think about her. So the two of you together it's a lovely idea. So there's so much in your artistic practice that you address, and I'm a little bit nervous about asking you to identify like singular themes, but if there's a way into talking about your artistic practice sort of holistically, how would you describe what are the motivations, what are the questions, the ideas, the problems, the things that you explore in your creative practice?
Well, I mean, I think it's evolving, and I'm noticing its evolution now, as well, because I live mostly in Pakistan now, actually. So, I think as you move and as you shift, your work and what you notice and what you focus on shifts as well. But even with the shifts, it's an evolution from what was already there in your mind, and what you may have already played with at one point. So I guess to answer your question, the majority of what I try and tackle in my work is related to history, social history, history of resistance, history of struggle, and also how history is all made up at the end of the day as well. So it's not just these histories of struggles and resistance and all these other things, but you could ask one person what happened, and they'll give you a completely different answer to you asking another person, and that could be based on what country you live in, or who was in power, or who wanted to hide the truth, or you know, I mean, there's so much that clouds what truly history is. And you know, without record, it becomes harder and harder, you know. So in that sense, also my work is about making up history too, but history in the future. So you know, futurism is currently my obsession, but more so, you know, it's a speculative future that my current practice looks at. Tomorrow We Inherit the Earth, which is a body of work I've been working on since 2000 and 2000 and I guess, yeah, about 2017. You know, we're now 2021. Okay, wow. So since 2017, and it's textile based and performance based, and now currently film based. I'm working on a series of films to kind of actually wrap up the series. Because the series was so narrative and speculative fiction-y, you know, it couldn't be absorbed fully within a gallery show. So the films give narrative to things that were difficult to inscribe narrative onto. And this current film, there's like series within series. So Tomorrow We Inherit the Earth is the umbrella project. And then the films are called Abjad. And there's 4 films. Well, inshallah, there will be 4 films. They're not done yet. You know, they're meant to sort of narrate this speculative future that I imagine in my work.
Yes, fingers crossed that all of the films will come together, especially the one that you're working on most recently. It's a fascinating space that you work within, and I've had the good fortune of curating your work into a 2-person exhibition at SF Camera Work, and I think that was my first immersive experience working with you and your work. And it's, you know, as someone who very much admires the work that you do, and as a curator, it's so satisfying to see it all come together in this, you know, culminating fashion in the films, in the exhibitions, all of the work that you've done to see it all, you know, all come together across media. And I think that's one of the many things I admire about you, is that you don't seem to limit yourself to a particular media. There is however like the idea, the concept, the problem, the issue, whatever you happen to be working on at that moment in time, like however it manifests, and whatever media that you choose to address it, it just seems like it's such a silly observation, but like it's the perfect media, like whatever you settle on is the perfect media for what you're addressing in that moment. And over the course of time, as the project Tomorrow We Inherit the Earth is evolving, like I see that more and more with each new sort of project or branch of the project as it comes to fruition in these various media. And so to see that all manifest is it's just again, it's just such a fan, but like it's so satisfying to see that all to just see it all come to fruition that way. So it's and we're, you know, lucky that you share it with us. and I understand that the final film is, like, you're still in progress, and so won't talk about that too much, but from what you've shared on Instagram and what we've seen of it so far, it is a feast for the eyes, and it gives me a lot to look forward to, and I'm sure that will be the sentiment when we all are, you know, when we're all able to witness it. So fingers crossed.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Crossed. It's coming together. It's coming together well, actually. It's coming together well. So I'm hopeful, and you know, with each hurdle comes a new exciting lesson that we actually apply, and it grows with that as well. So so yeah, it's exciting, and I'm working with a great team here as well. So that makes it honestly, it's the team. The team makes it. I'm the one that's like, I want this, please, and the team helps make that happen. So you know, it wouldn't be possible if it weren't for a lot of support from a lot of other people. But yeah, and generally everything in life. But anyway, we won't get into that just yet. But yeah, I'll let you continue.
So one of the primary motivations for Zamin project is to be thinking about, like, how do we, in the Swana community, how do we build and sustain our own resources? And that can be, it's such an open-ended, it's one of the reasons I love this question, is so open-ended. And so when I say to you, Zulfi, like, when you think of resources in relation to the Swana community in the Bay Area or worldwide, perhaps, like, what comes to mind when you hear the word resources?
You know, I think for me, when I think of resources within the Swana community, and especially within the Bay Area, I mean, we are each other's resource. Of course, we curate each other's work. We are the ones who understand each other. And of course, you know, our audience, the question of audience in the Bay Area and in the art world in the United States in general, I think if you're not an American artist who's not talking about a pre 9/11 American issue, you're very much sidelined. And if you are talking about a post 9/11 issue, you have to be talking about it along lines that you know, the regular old American can understand. And I say that, I don't mean, I mean, it sounds like I say that with contempt, and I mean that. Because there is sadly a really limited range of what the American audience is able to absorb, right? And as artists, we need an audience, right? So who's our audience? We have each other, and we're slowly educating the non-Arab or non-Swana or non-Iranian or non-North African audience in the very complexity that is us, right? We're not just all like Muslim, not Muslim, oppressed, hijabi, not hijabi, unoppressed, you know, victim, oppressor sort of dynamic. We're much more than that. We are stories, we are people, we are histories, we are families, we are recipes, we are textiles, we are this, we are, you know, we are a whole other thing. We don't always have to talk about how we're suffering. So, you know, and I think that is something that we provide each other, is that space to complicate. And being a lot of that space makes the conversation in general more complicated, both within our communities and outside our communities. So I think that's the biggest resource that I think we have. I think as far as moneyed resources, now that's always a crazy thing to get into as someone who's been applying for grants and all these things in the Bay Area for so long. That is a whole other ball game. And it can feel a little unfair when there's, like, you know, only one grant that you know is only going to go to one Muslim. And that happens, and you're like, are you gonna get it or am I gonna get it? So there's, you know, are you gonna tick the box or am I gonna tick the box? So it, you know, that happens too.
It's funny, of course, as you're talking about it, especially the animated way that you talk about it, but you're getting at a very serious question, which is ultimately, like, the financial resources that are available to artists, and that there is the feeling of, you know, are you as a Muslim man, as a queer man, or you know, as a person who is, like, how you identify, and that funding for, you know, potential projects, like, hinges on this, like, demographic identification, and that it's I mean, it's useful data, but at the same time, it can also be limiting as far as who, like, and you hit it right on the head, like who is applying, and then who in this, you know, broader community will be awarded with this financial recognition, which means that projects that you're working on can go forward. And like, it makes all of these future plans suddenly much more approachable. But there is a, you know, it feels like there is this, there is a finite pool of cash, and it's, you know, it does come down to demographics, and that's, I don't know, the hard, like, data reality of that is, I don't know, it's frustrating. And my hope is that as more and more Swana artists are, you know, working in the Bay Area, and that there is this groundswell from the community that says, like, we are here, we are making work, we, if I may, like, insist on this recognition, and that hopefully those who are funding this will see that and sort of respond to it, so that there might be 2 grants instead of just 1 that are available. but I think it moves the conversation forward, and that is, you know, not surprisingly, coming from a grassroots, a groundwork level, instead of from this sort of like not from the top down necessarily. And I think that's what part of what makes the Swana community, as I've encountered it, experienced it, so profoundly moving, and such a pleasure to be a part of. So it's, you know, and hopefully, I think projects like Zamin, you know, these conversations, someone watching this will say, like, oh, this is something we need to you know, to pay more attention to from that perspective. All right, so the fourth and final question. It's never, and I don't want to let you go because I haven't seen you in so long, but, you know, we'll wrap it up here. But the last question is, what have you been thinking about lately? What's top of mind for you? What is keeping you so, like, mentally active right now?
Wow, big question. A lot of things. You know, I don't want people to get bored at the final question. But, you know, you know, I will say I'm very honored to be included as a Swana Bay Area artist, but I think a lot of the reality of my life is, like, I don't know when I'll be coming back to the United States again. For me, I've moved back here, and it's both a personal and a political choice. I don't, I don't know. I think for me, life, you know, the way art and life have been moving has been quite interesting. You know, like, I take care of my home here. I'm my brother's guardian. I am basically a parent, homemaker figure. And I start to see, especially when we talk about resources and grants and all these things, that actually these systems are made under the assumption that it is only you that you exist for. And I think that for me has been something that I've been really reckoning with the art world, that it makes no space for someone who may have to fix, you know, their electricity, or someone who may have to deal with the plumbing issue, or someone who may have to fix their roof, or someone who may have to, you know, think about school fees and school books and teachers and after school tuitions and all of these different things. And I think the art world is actually, especially under the pandemic, has just shown how elitist it is, right? Like, you need resources to get resources within the art world. That's not to say I don't enjoy getting those resources when they come, so please keep giving them to me. But you can see how the system is designed, especially under strenuous circumstances such as this. And I say this as someone who had resources to get resources, and also struggled to get resources too. So that for me has been on my mind a lot. But aside from that, which is kind of on a more serious note, on a note of I guess more joviality, I'm starting to enjoy the long experience of making art. And I think that's something that I've been recently learning is that if you want to do something good, it's going to take time. And especially with this film project, you know, each film takes time. You know, and each work that I used to produce, you know, like for galleries and shows, like, okay, I have a deadline, I have a month to make like this hand embroidered sequin giant piece, which I'm going to do. I don't have that leisure of like, okay, that's the only thing in your life you're doing now, you know? So the slow process of making art, I've been really enjoying and loving. And that sometimes it's nice to just sort of like walk into a piece rather than run into a piece and sort of gamble with whether it's going to turn out well or not. You know, I think there was a time when I could do that and it felt okay, but now I'm loving the luxury of taking my sweet time with something. So so that's I guess something on my mind. Yeah.
Wow, Zulfi, thank you so much for that. Just the way that you describe the pace of producing work. So something that's deadline driven, you know, a month a month out, and it's a massive piece that you're working on, and like you'll just be hand embroidering, you know, for every hour that you're awake. And just thinking about the size and the scale of your work that I've seen, and the sheer number of creative hours that go into making them. I'll never ask you to do anything on a deadline ever again. As a curator, like, I will never ask you to do that again. But the way that you describe, especially the film work, that process, and walking into something as opposed to running into it, is such a beautiful and like on, you know, perfectly on point analogy for how the work gets made, and appreciating the time that you put into it. Like, not that you didn't before, but that there is so much that comes in dedicating or allowing time for these projects to realize, for the thinking to go into it, for the physical process of making the work, for that all to happen, so that you're not, I don't know, just killing yourself at the end of the day, basically. But you've of course, and as always, given us so much to think about. So thank you so much for agreeing to sit for this interview and participating in Zamin project. And I hope that everything on your end continues to go as smoothly as possible. And if we're fortunate enough to see you in the Bay Area, like, we'll see you when you get back, and we will welcome you with open arms. And thanks to everyone for watching this interview, and we'll see you here the next time. Thank you.